Long before its ruins became an underwater mystery, Canopus occupied a powerful position near the Mediterranean coast of Egypt. It stood in the Canopic region of the Nile Delta east of the city that would later become Alexandria. Waterways connected the settlement to the Nile. The sea connected it to the wider Mediterranean. People, goods, and beliefs could move through the region from Egypt toward the Greek world and back again. Ancient Canopus became both a port and a religious destination. Historical accounts describe it as a prosperous settlement associated with sanctuaries dedicated to Osiris and Serapis. Pilgrims traveled there seeking divine assistance, healing, and answers from the sacred institutions connected to the city. But Canopus was not isolated. Nearby stood Thonis Heraklion, another major settlement of the Canopic region. Together, the two cities occupied a shifting landscape at the mouth of an important Nile branch. According to the British Museum, the Canopic branch was once the most navigable route through this part of the delta, allowing ships from the Mediterranean to travel inland. The geography created opportunity. It also created danger. The same waters that brought trade and pilgrims would eventually cover parts of the city entirely. Canopus existed at a meeting point between cultures. Egyptian traditions remained powerful, but Greek influence grew after the conquests of Alexander the Great and the rise of the Ptolemaic dynasty. The art recovered from Canopus reflects that contact. A statue of the deified Queen Arsinoe II, discovered at the site, combines Egyptian stone and pose with a style influenced by Greek representations of the body. The British Museum has described such finds as evidence of deep interaction between Egyptian and Greek communities. Religious ceremonies also connected Canopus to the story of Osiris, the god associated with death, restoration, and the afterlife. Ancient ritual objects recovered from the submerged cities of the Canopic region have helped scholars reconstruct celebrations connected to the mysteries of Osiris. The symbolism is difficult to ignore. A city that once reenacted divine death and rebirth would itself disappear, and many centuries later, return through archaeology. But Canopus was not only sacred, it was known beyond Egypt. The Roman Emperor Hadrian visited the region and was sufficiently impressed by Canopus that elements associated with it were recreated at his enormous villa near Tivoli in Italy. The city had become an idea, a place famous enough to be remembered far beyond the Nile Delta. Yet fame could not protect it from the unstable ground beneath its foundations. The Nile Delta is not solid, unchanging land. It is built from sediment carried and deposited by the river. Over long periods, those soft layers can compress. Water levels change, coastlines retreat, and earthquakes can destabilize already vulnerable ground. Researchers believe that a combination of seismic activity, subsidence, soil failure, and rising water contributed to the submergence of settlements in the Canopic region. The process was probably not one single dramatic night in which an entire city vanished at once. Different parts of the landscape may have failed at different times. Some structures collapsed, some districts became flooded, other areas were abandoned as channels shifted and the coastline changed. The nearby Alexandria region recorded repeated earthquakes across many centuries, while long-term sea level change also affected its ancient coastline. Canopus gradually moved from history into memory, then from memory into legend. Its temples disappeared beneath water and sediment. Its statues broke. Its harbor structures became invisible, and for generations, people knew the city largely through ancient writing and scattered remains on land. But the sea had not destroyed everything, it had covered it. That distinction would matter enormously when archaeologists finally arrived with the tools to look beneath the surface of Abu Qir Bay. By the time the region entered the medieval period, much of Canopus and nearby Thonis Heraklion lay beneath Abu Qir Bay. The cities remained hidden for more than 1,000 years. The water protected some objects from later building activity, but it also buried them under mud and marine growth. Locating the city would require more than a diver seeing a column on the seabed. Archaeologists needed to map a drowned landscape. They needed to distinguish temples from docks, statues from rubble, and ancient channels from modern sediment. In 1996, the European Institute for Underwater Archaeology began surveying a vast area of western Abu Qir Bay using remote sensing technology. The investigation eventually helped locate and document the submerged cities of Thonis Heraklion and Canopus. And beneath the water, researchers found something far greater than isolated ruins. They found the remains of an entire cultural landscape. But one discovery near the temple of Serapis raised an unsettling question. Archaeologists found a collection of broken statues deposited together. Were they simply wreckage from a natural disaster? Or had someone deliberately gathered and hidden them before the city disappeared? The evidence suggested that Canopus had faced destruction from more than the sea alone. Underwater archaeology is slow. Visibility can change in seconds. A diver may work only centimeters from an object without understanding the larger structure around it. Sediment must be removed carefully. Every artifact must be photographed and mapped before it moves. The position of an object can be as important as the object itself. Frank Gaudio and the European Institute for Underwater Archaeology used geophysical survey methods to examine the seabed before excavation. The work was conducted in cooperation with Egyptian authorities and developed through a long-term partnership with the Oxford Center for Maritime Archaeology. The researchers were not searching randomly. Ancient texts provided clues, historical maps offered possibilities. Scientific instruments revealed shapes and magnetic anomalies below the sediment. Then divers investigated the targets one at a time. A wall appeared, then a statue, then a temple zone, then the buried edge of a harbor. The city began to return, not as a complete skyline, but as thousands of connected pieces slowly assembled through years of careful, methodical work beneath the surface of the bay. Canopus was famous for the worship of Serapis, a deity whose cult reflected the cultural mixture of Ptolemaic Egypt. At the submerged site, archaeologists identified remains associated with the temple of Serapis. Nearby, they found a remarkable assemblage of fragmented statues. The objects were not simply scattered across a wide destruction layer. Researchers examined whether the pieces had been deliberately collected and deposited together. One explanation connects the assemblage to the destruction of pagan temples during the late 4th century. Christian authorities acted against some traditional sanctuaries, and historical evidence records the destruction of pagan temples in Canopus around the year 391 of the Common Era. Researchers have considered whether fragments were gathered for reuse as building material or possibly placed together in an attempt to protect them from further destruction. No conclusive evidence has proved one single motive for the deposit. This altered the mystery significantly. The city's monuments may have been damaged not only by earthquakes and water. Religious and political transformation may also have reshaped the site before the sea finished covering it. Some statues had endured multiple endings. First, the fall of the religious world that created them, then physical destruction, then submergence, then more than 1,000 years of silence beneath the Mediterranean. Among the most celebrated discoveries from Canopus is the statue associated with Queen Arsinoe II. She was a daughter of Ptolemy I and became the wife of her brother, Ptolemy II. After her death, her cult spread through Egypt. The Canopus statue depicts her in a form influenced by both Egyptian and Greek artistic traditions. Its discovery helped scholars understand how the Ptolemaic rulers presented themselves to diverse communities. The sculpture was not merely decoration, it was political communication. A Greek Macedonian dynasty governing Egypt adopted ancient pharaonic traditions while also preserving elements recognizable to Greek audiences. Underwater archaeology had recovered more than a portrait. It had recovered evidence of how power was constructed and displayed across an entire civilization. But each object also created a difficult choice. Should it remain where it was found or should it be lifted from the sea? The modern discipline of underwater archaeology does not treat the seabed as a treasure chest. Removing every object can destroy the context that gives a site meaning. Large structures may be more stable underwater than after exposure to air. Salt can penetrate stone and metal. Once an artifact is raised, conservation may take months or years. Egypt is a party to the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization's 2001 Convention on the Protection of the Underwater Cultural Heritage. The convention prioritizes preservation in place when appropriate and opposes the commercial exploitation of underwater cultural heritage. In August 2025, Egypt publicly presented a new recovery operation in Abu Qir Bay. Reports described monumental pieces being lifted from the submerged site for the first time in approximately 25 years. Egyptian officials emphasized that only selected objects would be brought ashore. The objects recovered included monumental sculptural pieces associated with Egypt's long pharaonic, Ptolemaic, and Roman history. One reported object was a quartz sphinx bearing the royal cartouche of Ramesses II. Other finds included a granite statue dated to the late Ptolemaic period and additional sculptural remains. The broader underwater site also contains evidence of limestone buildings, possible temple structures, water reservoirs, a dock, and maritime activity. Some of these features were documented but left beneath the sea. The variety reveals something important. Canopus was not frozen in one period. The city's landscape accumulated history across many centuries. Older pharaonic objects could be moved or reused in later temples. Ptolemaic rulers added their own monuments. Roman inhabitants changed the settlement again. The submerged site became a layered archive of human activity. But public excitement created another danger. Some headlines described the operation as though Canopus had only just been discovered in 2025. That is misleading. The submerged Canopic region has been investigated for decades. The 2025 recovery was significant because it returned attention to the site and raised selected major objects, not because archaeologists suddenly discovered the entire city for the first time. Distinguishing those facts matters. The real story is more impressive than the exaggeration. Among the structures reported at the underwater site was a dock stretching approximately 125 meters. Researchers also documented evidence associated with vessels and maritime activity. A dock of that scale supports the image of Canopus as a connected coastal center rather than an isolated ceremonial settlement. Ships would have brought people, pilgrims, food, building materials, luxury goods, and messages from distant ports. The dock was part of the machinery that allowed Canopus to function, but it may also help researchers reconstruct how water moved around the city. Ancient harbor installations preserve clues about former shorelines and water depths. Their positions can reveal how dramatically the landscape has changed. The sea did not merely rise over a city that remained in place. The ground itself moved, channels shifted, sediment compacted, sections of the coast lost stability. The geography that made Canopus prosperous had also made it vulnerable. There is no verified account of a single eyewitness watching all of Canopus sink. No surviving document provides an exact hour when the city vanished. Researchers instead built the explanation from geology, archaeology, and regional history. Earthquakes affected northern Egypt, soft delta sediments compacted, soil liquefaction may have weakened parts of the urban landscape. The sea advanced, and the waterways that sustained the city changed. Researchers believe these submergence unfolded over time, although individual destructive events may have accelerated the process. The absence of one dramatic ending makes the story more unsettling. Canopus did not necessarily disappear with one final explosion. It may have been lost piece by piece. A flooded street, a damaged sanctuary, an abandoned harbor, a district surrendered to the water, until the city no longer existed as a living place. Canopus was a real ancient settlement in Egypt's Canopic region. It became a prosperous port and major religious center associated with Osiris and Serapis. Egyptian and Greek cultural traditions met there. The site later experienced religious transformation, structural destruction, and profound environmental change. Large parts of ancient Canopus now lie beneath Abu Qir Bay. Underwater surveys beginning in the 1990s helped map and excavate those remains. Archaeologists have documented temples, statues, arbor installations, and objects spanning multiple historical periods. These are the confirmed foundations of the story. But important uncertainties remain. Researchers do not know the complete sequence in which every district of Canopus was abandoned or submerged. They cannot assign every broken statue to an earthquake, religious destruction, or later movement. They have not excavated every structure, and much of the ancient landscape remains beneath sediment. No conclusive evidence has confirmed that one single catastrophe destroyed the entire city at once. The strongest explanation involves several connected forces: seismic activity, subsidence, soil instability, changing waterways, and long-term sea level rise. Archaeologists must also distinguish Canopus from nearby submerged sites, particularly Thoni's Heraklion. Popular media sometimes blend the cities together, but they had distinct urban areas and functions within the same broader region. Their stories are connected, they are not identical. The most important discovery at Canopus may not be a single statue, it may be the city itself. Its remains show that ancient Egypt was not culturally isolated. Canopus connected river and sea, Egypt and Greece, religion and commerce, pharaonic tradition and Ptolemaic innovation. The city's disappearance also reminds us that civilizations depend on landscapes that can change. Ports become dry land, rivers move, earthquakes lower coastlines. The sea enters streets built to keep it outside. Canopus was not defeated by one enemy, it was gradually overtaken by history, politics, geology, and water. Yet in 2025, when monumental objects rose from Abu Qir Bay, the city appeared to reverse its fate. For a few moments, stone that had rested beneath the Mediterranean returned to sunlight. Cameras recorded the water pouring away. Conservators waited, and a civilization once hidden beneath the sea became visible again. But most of Canopus remains below. Its streets are still incomplete. Its timeline still contains gaps. And somewhere beneath the sediment may be the evidence that changes the story once more. The underwater heritage faces threats from pollution, construction, illegal recovery, changing currents, and climate-related coastal pressure. A city survived beneath the sea for centuries. Modern attention must not become the next threat. What do you believe really happened? Do you believe Canopus disappeared mainly because of gradual environmental change, or could one catastrophic earthquake have caused the city's final collapse? Should Egypt recover more of the monuments for public display, or should most of the city remain protected beneath the sea? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments below. If you enjoyed this investigation, subscribe to Mysterious Crime. Like this video, share it with someone who loves documentaries, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next investigation. Every mystery has a story.